Should the Ottawa Senators continue to pursue Coyotes defenseman Jacob Chychrun? The price tag has been revealed by Ottawa media, what's likely being asked for by the Coyotes. Plus, we have other signings as well, including some players leaving the NHL, heading to the KHL, and it looks like the Toronto Maple Leafs and young defenseman Rasmus Sandin are pretty much at a standstill. We have comments from his agent, which will give us an update on contract negotiations. We'll discuss all that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot to cover here today with some news and rumors. Once again, still from Digby, Nova Scotia. Unfortunately, today has been bad weather, pouring rain, thunderstorms all day. I was hoping to get outside and spend more time outdoors and maybe try to do a video down by the Bay of Fundy, but just wasn't in the cards. Here today, the next 2 days while I'm still here are looking to be a bit nicer, and hoping I can give you some better scenery here than what I've been able to do the last couple of days. But on with today's news, former NHL player Cedric Paquette, who most recently played with the Montreal Canadiens, is leaving the NHL and apparently has signed a contract over in the KHL. So obviously we saw several North American players and European players too, for that matter, leave the KHL recently after the situation broke out with the Ukraine and Russia and all the tension that's going on over there. But we are still seeing some North American players. Not sure about the European players so much because I haven't kept as much track of that. But for NHL players coming from North America especially, there's still some, like Paquette, going over to the KHL. So we'll see how things work out for him over there. The Chicago Blackhawks have signed Jack Johnson. He gets a 1-year deal, $950,000. That's not something that we expected. I'm not shocked that Jack Johnson got a contract. Just not really sure what the plan is there for Chicago. I guess he's more of a veteran placeholder. We know Chicago seems to be on board for the tankathon here to try to get Connor Bedard in the 2023 NHL draft. The bottom out for Bedard's sweepstakes is heavily underway, and there's expected to be about 3 or 4 teams really pushing for that top spot in the draft. There's a few other players that are expected to be really, really good as well. Near the top, Bedard by far the best from what we've seen so far. So it's a little bit surprising in a way they'd bring in a veteran guy, but obviously Jack Johnson's not the strongest defenseman. But either way, he gets a 1-year contract with the Hawks, $950,000. Now the Arizona Coyotes have signed one of their first-round picks from the 2022 NHL draft. Of course, they did have multiple picks. This one was the one they used on pick number 29 late in the first round on the big defenseman Maverick Lamoureux, who they get from the QMJHL's Drummondville Voltigeurs. Of course, he's the big 6'7" right shot D. Big size. I think he's a little bit of a project in my opinion. I'm not entirely convinced he's going to be a regular NHL player. He very well might be. I just think it's going to take a lot more work and development. Certainly not as much of a, not that first rounders are a guarantee, but I just think that the odds are, he's going to have to overcome a few more things and obstacles and skills he's going to have to work on to get there, but they got him signed for his ELC, which is certainly good, and we'll see how things go on the big rangy defenseman. We also saw a signing as well in Carolina, signing former 2019 third-round pick right shot defenseman from Finland, Anthony Honka. Of course, he's played over in Finland the past few years in Liga for JYP, put up some pretty good offensive numbers. So, of course, he's now, in his draft plus 3 years. So, he's certainly looking like he'll likely play in the American Hockey League for the upcoming year, get adapted to the North American game, and see if he can challenge for a roster spot. But the Carolina blue line is fairly deep, and would be a challenge. I don't see that being a possibility this year. But, of course, with changes that we could see in the next year or two, we'll see how things work out for Honka. But he could certainly be a player for them here down the road. Now, one UFA that we do have a little bit of talk and speculation on is former Canuck and Ranger Tyler Mott, who split the season last year, was a deadline pickup by the Rangers and had a pretty good end of the year. Played well in Vancouver, enough to get a lot of attention near the deadline. Hasn't signed a contract yet. He's still one of the more prominent players out there that is expected to get a deal somewheres. That Mott is unsigned, but apparently there are rumors that there's about 4 to 5 teams that have what you'd call pretty serious interest. The problem is like a lot of NHL teams right now, after doing a lot of other transactions, is a lot of them are capped out and they're trying to move money. And as we talked about in yesterday's video, a couple of players that were expected to be on the move. Like there's a lot of things that are at a standstill, and a lot of it is just there's just not a lot of cap space around the league to go around. So there's only a handful of teams that have any amount of space they can do much with, and of course they're probably creating a bit of a bidding war for the teams who really want to dump money, right? So it's not easy. So we'll see, but that's the reports are, is that 4 or 5 teams have interest, but they're all trying to kind of make some adjustments with their cap and move some money out in order to bring the veteran in. So we'll see. I mean, obviously Mott's, getting into his mid-20s, has a pretty good run here between his time in Vancouver and the Rangers. Looks like he could be a pretty good bottom 6 forward, but obviously we'll see where he finally ends up. Now, one contract that's gone absolutely nowhere, and that's a quote from agent Louis Gross's Rasmus Sandin, the young defenseman for the Toronto Maple Leafs, who was a restricted free agent for the first time after completing his entry-level deal. Of course, Luke Fox of Sportsnet has a new article out from the past couple of days here looking at that situation. He was able to get a few comments from Louis Gross on the situation, as well as Kyle Dubas, the GM of the Leafs. Dubas seems to play it off like, of course, his main focus on the comments he's made indicate that they see Liljegren and Sandin as being a big part of the team's future, which I certainly agree with. They should and could be. He also says that part of the deal with Sandin is that they want to equip him to be have all the tools he needs to try to work on being healthy and becoming a regular. And then, of course, when you hear Louis Gross say talks have gone nowhere, it's really kind of mind-boggling if you think about it strictly from a term and money perspective. I mean, I don't think there'd probably be a great deal of difference of opinion on term. I would suspect a player like Sandin, who has completed his ELC but has not really, put together what you would call a full NHL season, being a regular release, that he's not going to get a long-term deal. Like, I think that both sides would agree a bridge deal is appropriate. You're probably looking at anywhere from 1 to 3 years. What the term is, it's hard to say, but I would say definitely in that range. And I imagine they're looking at a couple of different options. For example, wouldn't be shocked if the Leafs did a 1-year deal, try to get them the shortest term, the shortest money, smallest money, so that they can make some more adjustments. They have other players that are going to be expiring and kind of revisit next year. That very well might end up be what works out best for everybody. But I think, in all honesty, he doesn't have a ton of leverage on money. He really doesn't. So, in my opinion, I think this is more about his role and his spot under the depth chart and where they see him. And I think he feels, at least in his agent, and I wouldn't completely disagree with him, that he's earned enough of a spot to be a regular in the top 6 for the Leafs decor. And based on the current depth chart and the current roster, that's likely not going to happen. I mean, at this point, they're not going to bring in some of these vets that they just signed, like Mark Giordano, and not play him, or at least not on a regular basis. So that, to me, is the bigger part of the issue. I've been saying it all offseason. I really think in the case of Sandin, he's more worried and looking like he's going to be a healthy scratch a lot of the time. Between, you look at the left side of the defense, you've got Morgan Riley, obviously you got Jake Muzzin, you got Mark Giordano, you got TJ Brody, who's a lefty but normally plays the right side. Do you want 2 of your right shot defensemen being on their offside? They also have Justin Hall and Timothy Liljegren, who are both right shot. Hall is on his final year of his deal, $2 million, has been rumored to be a potential trade piece for some time. Has never happened. It could happen sometime during the season, but that's not a given. He could ride the year out in Toronto. Really boils down to how he plays, how he fits, and how everything goes. There's a lot of X factors there. And to me, I don't think Sandin's overly interested in playing his offside from what we had heard before. I think he'd prefer to play his strong side on the left, and he doesn't see himself getting an opportunity. And I think that the agent and the player might be trying, and I'm not sure if they're going to be successful or not, to kind of force the Leafs into moving somebody to give him more of a spot. I don't see that happening. Now, will he go to training camp without a contract? It's very unlikely. At this point, he can either withhold services, which is really the only leverage that he has, I guess, or they could threaten an offer sheet, which is, I guess it's possible, but there's not many teams out there that can do it that would have enough of a cap room to really make it so the Leafs would want to walk away. Because why bother doing it? You're going to have to usually overpay the player on a short-term deal to be successful. I'm not sure that there's a ton of teams out there that would do it, but there might be 1 or 2. You never know. Although I do think it's pretty unlikely. I think it's fair to say. So an offer sheet, they could threaten it. I don't think the Leafs are going to be too concerned about it. But withholding services is the biggest factor here. We could obviously maybe even see a scenario like we saw with William Nylander, who is the same agent, by the way, in case you forgot that. I've been he held out until December. Not saying that's going to happen with Sandin, but it does kind of make you wonder. So we'll see if things are not progressing well. And I do think based on the comments and everything that it's more about his spot on the roster in the depth chart than it is about term and money. I think the term part's easy. Money maybe a little bit, but you think if it was just about money, they would have bridged that gap by now and got something done. Now, on the Jacob Chychrun front, now we've talked about him a few times recently, so I'm sure there's a few of you are going to leave comments and say, oh yeah, you're not giving us anything new. Well, this is new, and it's obviously from Brent Wallace and Sean Simpson, both on Twitter. Brent Wallace, very well connected, former TSN reporter for a long time, of course, now currently hosts the Wally Mathot show with former NHLer Mark Mathot. Very well connected to the team, different sources. And according to him, the asking price, now this is the part that we haven't really gotten into because we didn't really see any, I guess you could say proper, connected people that have been gone publicly saying what the asking appears to be. So from what we're hearing of what he's saying is that the asking price for Arizona is 2 first-round picks, a young player, like a high-end prospect, and then it looks like they would also likely take Nikita Zaitsev if they get all that. So they're going to want, and there's likely going to be, like a mid-round pick in there as well. Now, I've seen different comments from different sources connected to that between what Brent Wallace and Sean Simpson was saying, that there are some executives out there that think like a Seth Jones trade, which happened obviously between Columbus and Chicago, not too long ago, could be used as a comparable here. And I don't know that that's really justifiable. Now, of course, Seth Jones, when he was traded from Columbus, they got 2 first-rounders. They also got a second-rounder, and they got a young defenseman in Adam Boqvist. That was quite a haul. Now, of course, you're seeing how that's worked out on the other side. It was different, too. Of course, he was a guy who was needing an extension going into the following year of his deal. Chychrun has term, so that's not something that would have to be worked out. Not too different in age, a little bit, but not drastic. Jones was probably a little bit highly regarded around the leagues. Probably you could say that he was, a more established, stronger defenseman at that point of his career than Chychrun has. Although he's had some good stretches and certainly appears to be, a really good defenseman as well. But I'm not sure that he's quite at that level. Although this past year is Jones' first year in Chicago, he certainly had his moments where he didn't look to be overly good anymore, but he certainly finished stronger than he started. That's also for sure. Now, when it comes to another deal that I think is maybe not exactly perfect when it comes to a comparable, but is close as John Marino, who was just traded out of Pittsburgh this current offseason, just not too long ago, to the New Jersey Devils. They got Ty Smith, who was a pretty good young defenseman, so a real good young player, and a 3rd-round pick. Now, I'm not sure that that's perfect either. Personally, I think that that's more likely. I think Chychrun might be better than Marino, but not the Jones. So I think the deal to me should be somewhere in between. But obviously it makes sense why the Senators have not pulled the trigger here. It's a big ask. If they're going to give up the 1st-round pick for the next 2 years, and they might be able to get them to agree to some sort of draft protection if it's like top 5, top 10 or something like that. But the 2023 draft is going to be really deep and good. At this point, could the Sens make the playoffs? Sure they could. They made a lot of big improvements, but they're also in an incredibly tough division. And as much as I think it's a possibility on playoffs, I think it's far from a given. Given you got Toronto, you've got Tampa, you've got Florida, and you still got Boston in the hunt. I think Boston's season is going to be a big role. If they're going to be the team that Ottawa's going to have to fight with, I think, the most for that, probably one of the last playoff spots, if they can get in. And if they don't do that, even if they make big improvements and are way better, but fall short, that could be a disaster to not have your 1st-rounder. It could be a really high pick here going to the Coyotes. So they have to negotiate some kind of protection there. Who's the high-end prospect going to be? Are they looking for Ridley Gregg, who's having a phenomenal World Junior tournament right now? I mean, I know Jake Sanderson definitely wouldn't be on the table. That one's about the only player I think we can say for certain. Maybe it's Robbie Herventi, who's also having a real solid tournament for the Finns right now. They have lots of other interesting players too. But those are probably the main couple ones that come to mind. But you could also be looking at some defensemen like a Lassie Thompson or Jacob Bernard-Docker. I personally think the Coyotes would want a D-man. So if they're not getting Sanderson, I would think they'd probably ask for a guy like Thompson or JBD. I think you're going to throw in one of those guys. You're probably looking at 2 first-rounders. And then I think they're going to have to put something else in there, whether it be a mid-rounder or maybe a lower-level prospect. Something like that. It would be what it would take for them to also get Zaitsev out the door in the trade as well. And that, you got to question, is that too much? I mean, you get Chychrun, who's a good D, good contract, but is it too much? They might be able to go into the season without it, hope the price comes down, and maybe they go in a different direction. I don't know. I mean, I know there's been enough reports saying Chychrun would be quite happy and would really like to go to Ottawa. There's connections there, but that's way too steep. And it's no wonder why the Coyotes have not traded Chychrun as of yet, unless they come down. Like I said, I don't think they're looking. They're looking basically for pretty close to the Seth Jones trade, and I don't think that's a fair comparable. I think you're looking at better than Marino, but not where Jones is, and somewhere in between. And they don't feel rushed at all to move the guy because he's under term for a while. And right now, after coming off a down season, they might be selling low. So I don't know. This might be drug on for a while, unless Bill Armstrong decides that he really wants to get a deal done and not waste any more time. But for right now, if I'm Ottawa, I'm holding off on being patient, and we'll see if the price comes down or I'm looking elsewhere. But let me know your thoughts on that potential deal, what the asking price is. Would you pull the trigger on that kind of trade if you're Pierre Dorion and the Ottawa Senators? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.